some of these programs here. Don't need Kindle open. Don't need that open either. I think we're good. We're live. All right. Shalom. Shabbat shalom, everyone. Brother Doug. My mom's sister Sharon's on the other side of the room. That's why you don't see her right now. So we're going to be, as usual for Sabbath day, we're going to be going through our book by book, chapter by chapter readings. So we left off last time at Exodus 15 and 19. So if you guys haven't been on with us for all the studies, I suggest you go to the playlist of Exodus chapter by chapter readings. I have a whole playlist from where we started about a month or so ago in Exodus 1. I suggest you guys check that out just to kind of get the context of these weekly Sabbath day readings, so you can kind of figure out where we're going with these studies. Also, there's a playlist for when we first started these chapter by chapter readings. I also have a playlist on the channel called Genesis chapter by chapter readings. I would recommend you check that out as well. So without any further ado, we're going to start here. Exodus chapter 20. Let me just get my compare view going here. All right. So we got LXX, ESV, and Kalos. Okay. So Exodus 20. And Yahuwah spoke all these words, saying, I am Yahuwah your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other mighty ones beside me. You shall not make yourself an idol, nor a likeness of anything, whatever things are in heaven above, whatever are in the earth beneath, and whatever in the waters under the earth. Key phrase, though, in the Septuagint says idol. So I want to focus on that, because a lot of people take this command meaning you can never have a graven thing. And the problem with that is then you have to say the menorah is a sin. The problem with generalizing this commandment is, guess what? The engraved cherubim in the temple was a sin then. Him telling, who was it? He allowed Solomon to engrave the cherubim on the walls in the temple. Okay, what in the tabernacle even. Like 10 chapters later, you find out that Moses is commanded to weave cherubim within the hangings of the tabernacle. So actual images, okay, of things in heaven above, right? So let's keep in context. Verse 4 is talking about a graven god, an idol. Idol's a god, okay? So let's keep that context there, okay? Because the Masoretic doesn't let you know he's talking about an idol, right, Mom? It doesn't say idol there.
That's right.
So that's the problem. Yeah. So they take away idol for some reason, which gives you the whole context of the whole thing. So we're at, Sister Sally just got back on. We're at Exodus chapter 20, verse 4. And we just read about the command of do not make a likeness of an idol. Do not make an idol, nor a likeness of anything, whatever things are in heaven above or whatever are in the earth beneath. And by the way, you could even say Nahushtan. Remember Nahushtan? Okay. Originally, Nahushtan was commanded by Yahuwah for them to make, just FYI. If you go to the book of Numbers, okay, the bronze serpent, okay, was commanded by Yahuwah for them to make. So let's keep everything in context with Exodus 20, verse 4.
NIV says idol.
Okay.
The ESV does not.
Yeah, so the NIV is siding with the Septuagint there, probably trying to give the context there, because the Masoretic manuscript does not give you the context in that verse. So it makes people think that you can't have paintings. I've seen people take this verse so extreme literally that they won't even have portraits of family members. They go crazy with it. I've seen, if you don't understand that it's talking about an idol in Exodus 20 verse 4, you're going to go crazy. You're going to get rid of every little thing you have. What we have to understand culturally is they would make statues, carved items to bow down to and worship.
Right.
So you're going to see in the next verse what I'm talking about. He literally reiterates, he says, you will not bow down to them nor serve them. That's one of the commandments right after this. Okay. So he's giving you the context even in the next verse. Okay. He says, you shall not bow down to them and serve them. So think about it. Do you know anyone that's going to bow down to a picture of a loved one?
No.
Or serve one? Okay. So, or a painting. Okay. Obviously he's talking about an idol. Okay. Obviously Yahuwah is talking about an idol here. And Sister Sally is dealing with some connection problems, I think. So verse 5, you shall not bow down to them nor serve them, for I am Yahuwah your Elohim, zealous. It should say zealous, not jealous, by the way. In the word in the Hebrew is zealous. So they, for whatever reason, they mistranslate that word. In the Targums, they actually put zealous. So I don't know why translators are stupid. Jealous is not the same word. Okay. So, that I really get pissed off when I see that. Okay. It should say zealous. I'm a zealous Elohim, repaying the sins of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation, to them that hate me. Okay. And then if you go to verse 6, it says, and bestowing mercy on them that love me to thousands, and on them that keep my commandments. And, we learned in Christianity, we can't earn his mercy and all that. But at the same time, not everyone gets his mercy. So I get what the Christian church is trying to say, but you're lying to people if you're going to say his mercy is for everyone and that we can't earn his mercy. Because right here it says, my bestowing mercy to them that love me. What does Yahushua say in John 14:6? If you love me, keep my commandments. So if you're not keeping his commandments, you don't love him, which that means those that don't love him don't get his mercy. So in essence, no, you can't earn his mercy, but at the same time, he only gives mercy to those that love him at the same time. So it's a little bit of leaven in that Christian understanding. There's still leaven in that, because then people get this idea that everyone is entitled to his mercy. No, that's not the case. You shall not take the name of Yahuwah your Elohim in vain, for Yahuwah your Elohim will not acquit him that takes his name in vain. Okay, so, and again, vanity has nothing to do with saying, oh my God. Okay, I've seen so many misunderstandings of this. Listen, look into the Hebrew, guys. Look into what the original Hebrew word for vanity means. Okay, it means to bring to nothing. Calling him the Lord is bringing his name to nothing. Calling him God is bringing his name to nothing. Calling him any generic title that the pagans would call their own gods is bringing his name to nothing. Also, according to other scriptures, bringing his name to nothing as his personality, his character to nothing would be to make an oath, taking an oath, swearing by his name and then breaking that oath. That's also a way to bring his name to nothing. But you cannot bring his name to nothing by saying Jesus Christ or oh my God. So, again, that's a church understanding we need to unlearn. That first of all, those are not his names, number one. Number two is that that's not what bringing his name to nothing means, or taking his name in vain means. So we have to let scripture interpret itself. Is it nice to say those things in that type of way? Probably no, it's not nice. And the intention is wrong. But at the same time, that's not what that commandment's talking about. Okay. Verse 8, remember the Sabbath day to set it apart. Okay, to Kadash it, set it apart. Okay, so one of the only top 10 here that he's actually telling you to remember. He's specifically outright saying to remember. Go ahead, Mom.
There's a huge amount of explanation on this commandment, where all the others are pretty straightforward and simple. He has in my NIV, man, there's an entire chunk of
verse 10.
here.
Verse 10 is like the whole explanation. Yeah. Because verse 9 says 6 days shall you work, and it says all your work. So I've seen people before say, well, if you're going to keep the Sabbath, you got to work 6 days a week. No, it does not say that. It says all your work for 6 days. That is including your job, but not exclusive to working a job for 6 days. He's saying all your work. Okay. So that does not mean that you have to work 6 days at a job to keep the Sabbath. I'm sorry. Christians that say that, I'm sorry, you're missing the whole point of that verse. That's not what it's saying. That's not. And I've seen so many people say that ignorantly because they want to have an excuse not to keep the Sabbath. Oh, well, you have to work a whole 6 days to be able to keep. It doesn't say that. It says all your work. All means there's other work for you to do other than working at a paid occupation. Okay. Right. That's the point. But on the 7th day is a Sabbath of Yahuwah, your Elohim. On it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your servant, nor your maidservant, your ox, nor your donkey, nor any cattle of yours, nor the stranger that sojourns with you. Now, obviously, a lot of us don't live in the rural farm areas anymore. A lot of us are in the city. So how would we interpret that? Well, we would interpret it as anything that you hire for work, you don't have them work on that day. So if you got lawn mowing, even I do my best to try because you're not really in control of this. You're not directly employing these people, but when you have deliveries come in throughout the week, I try my best to get a delivery not on the Sabbath. Can I always accomplish that? No, because quite frankly, they're not working for me. They're working for Amazon. They're working for Walmart. They're of their own free will going to do whatever they're going to do. They're choosing to work on the Sabbath. I'm not employing them. So that's kind of a gray area when you talk about deliveries and people that got to get their groceries delivered. And, if it gets delayed, you can't really be in control of that fully. So not to be rabbinical, but you do want to at least make an effort to try to have stuff not delivered on the Sabbath. Try to make an effort on that. I know sometimes even Amazon will give you like Prime days where you can choose your delivery day and all that. So that's where you have to spiritualize that a little bit with the cattle thing. Obviously, a lot of us don't have animals, don't have livestock. You all right, Mom?
Yeah, I'm right.
Okay. So it says here, verse 11, for in 6 days Yahuwah made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all things in them, and rested on the 7th day. Therefore, Yahuwah baruched the 7th day and set it apart. Okay. Verse 12, respect your father and your mother, that it may be well with you, and that you may live long on the Tob land, which Yahuwah your Elohim gives you. And again, respecting your father and mother doesn't mean doing what they tell you if it's contradicting the Bible. Right. I want to make that clear because some people misunderstand this. Respect means respect. Respect does not mean obey. Respect means, okay, I respect my parents. I am not going to be rebellious towards them. If they tell me to do something that doesn't contradict the Bible, I'm not going to be rebellious towards them. Okay. But you're not to obey them over the Creator. So I want to make that very clear, crystal clear. Okay. All right. So we're at Exodus 20, verse 13 here. You shall not murder. And again, the context of you should not murder. I would really recommend people that do not know about this, do not know the full context of this command to go in other portions of scripture. You will see you see it more expounded upon. You're going to see it. Yahuwah expounds upon who he's talking about. You should not murder. He doesn't mean in a general sense. So what we have to understand too, right, is who is he giving this law to on Mount Sinai? He's giving Israel this law, because what does he say in the prior chapter? He's telling Moses to set apart Israel to come to the mountain. Okay, he's making a covenant with Israel. Okay, so the thou shalt not murder has to be in the context of you do not kill your brother. And we see this actually in Genesis. In Genesis 9, way before the law of Moses, Noah is told, listen, a man shall not kill his brother. So what we got to understand is Yahuwah, when he says thou shalt not murder, he doesn't mean an extreme literal, you can never murder someone. Because if he does, he's contradicting himself, because literally a couple of books later, he's telling them to commit genocide on 7 tribes of people. And he's saying you do not have the ability to allow these people to escape. He's actually commanding them to kill people. So what we got to understand is thou shalt not murder has a context to it. Doesn't mean you don't ever murder and it's a sin to go to war and to murder someone. Okay, so we got to keep everything in context. Okay, later on in the Torah, Yahuwah expounds upon this and talks about what thou shalt not murder he's talking about. Okay, when a Hebrew Israelite would lie in wait for his own brother and would actually kill his brother on purpose. That's what he's talking about. Okay, so again, I just wanted to expound on that, because I know a lot of people get confused and say, Doug, well, it says do not murder. Yeah, but who is he talking to? Who is Yahuwah's audience here? His audience is his people. Okay, again, so we got to keep that in context. You all right, Mom?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. You shall not commit adultery. All right, so that's pretty obvious. Okay, so you don't commit adultery, you don't sleep with someone else's wife or even think about doing it. Okay, you shall not steal. Pretty self-explanatory there. Do not rob someone. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Notice how it says do not bear false witness against your neighbor. Again, who is the audience here? It is Israel. Okay, your fellow brother is your neighbor. Okay, so it's talking about do not bear false witness in judgment against your own brother. That's what he's saying. And this whole context of every command is about the top 10. Really, you can separate in 2 sections.
That's right.
Loving your fellow brother or sister and loving Yahuwah. That's really what it is.
That's right.
Where Christianity gets it wrong is they people. They try to ecumenicalize. No. It's about loving your own brother. Multiple times you'll see the word neighbor in these 10 commandments here. Okay. Verse 17, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, nor his field, nor his servant, nor his mate, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor any of his cattle, nor whatever belongs to your neighbor. So the word neighbor is used like 4 different times in that one verse. Okay, there's a reason why Yahuwah is saying it like that. And all the people perceived the thundering and the flashes and the voice of the trumpet. That's a little, make a little note of that verse right there. That's a parallel to Yahushua's return there, voice of the trumpet. Make a little note of that. Voice of the trumpet. Okay. And the mountain smoking, all the people feared and stood afar off. So people just joining us right now, we are at Exodus 20, verse 19. Okay. And said to Moshe, speak to us, and let not Yahuwah speak to us lest we die. Okay. And Masha says to them, be of Tob courage, for Yahuwah has come to you to try you, that his fear may be among you, that you sin not. And the people stood afar off, and Masha went into the darkness where Yahuwah was. And I see this weird doctrine out there that there can only be 12 hours in a day because supposedly because of one isolated verse that says there's no darkness in Yahuwah, and people have this weird esoteric understanding that darkness equals sin. First of all, physical darkness has nothing to do with sin. Yeah. Nighttime has nothing to do with sin. So people need to stop taking Gnostic, esoteric understandings of scripture. And I really get sick and tired of this because clearly multiple times it says Yahuwah dwells in darkness. So is Yahuwah is he dualistic or something? Yahuwah is all righteous, right? So if he's dwelling in darkness and he's all righteous, 110% righteous, and no sin is in him, that means physical darkness is not sin. It's very simple. And I'm sorry that I'm saying it with an attitude here, but I'm getting sick and tired of this Gnostic crap being spread in this messianic movement. I'm really getting sick and tired of it. I really am. So
it's had a very bad effect. It's caused people to change.
Right now, what you're experiencing right now from me is Yahuwah putting some righteous anger in me right now. Okay, so I'm sorry if that offends people, but I'm getting sick and tired of being nice about it. Okay, you need to anyone teaching you some Gnostic understanding like that, you need to flee away from them. I don't care if you consider them a brother, they're not a brother. If they're taking Gnostic understandings of scripture, they're not a brother, point blank. Okay, Yahuwah is giving them up to a reprobate mind if they really think physical nighttime darkness is sinful, then Yahuwah is giving them up to a reprobate mind, and it's that simple. So anyway, verse 22, and Yahuwah said to Masha, thus shall you say to the house of Jacob, and you shall report it to the children of Yasharal. You have seen that I have spoken to you from heaven. You shall not make to yourselves mighty ones of silver, mighty ones of gold. You shall not make to yourselves. You shall make to me an altar in earth. Upon it you shall sacrifice your whole burnt offerings and your peace offerings and your sheep and your calves in every place where I shall record my name. I will come to you and barak you. And if you will make to me an altar of stones, you shall not build them hewn, for you have lifted up your tool upon them. They are defiled. So what's interesting here is Yahuwah is not trusting them right now. If he even says, if you build me an altar of stone, listen, you better not put any chisel to it or anything, because I'm not trusting you. I know there's sin in you. I know you're going to screw up and you're going to make it into an idol. Nope. You can't use a tool on it. It's got to be a flat, square stone altar. Not going to let you use a chisel. So Yahuwah knows our hearts, man. He knows our hearts are wicked. That's the point of that commandment. He knows he can't trust us. He knows we'll make anything into an idol. Why do you think he didn't show an image on the mountain? Because he doesn't want us worshiping idols. He even says it later on in the Torah. You did not see a form of me on the mountain. Because he knows how we are.
We'll make something out of it. Yeah.
Last verse here of chapter 20. You shall not go up to my altar by steps, that you may not uncover your nakedness upon it. All right, here we go. So, Exodus 21. All right. let's see here. So chapter 21. Mom, would you like to
Sure.
read?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Chapter 21. Here are laws you are to set. The wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the woman and her children shall belong to her master, and only the man free. But if the servant declares, I love my master and my wife and children, and do not want to go free, when his master must take him before the judges, he shall take him to the door or the doorpost and pierce his ear with an awl. Then he will be his servant for life. If a man with his daughter or a servant, if a man sells his daughter as a servant, she is not to go free as men's servants do. If she does not please the master who has selected her for himself, he must let her be redeemed. He has no right to sell her to foreigners because he has broken faith with her. If he selects her for his son, he must grant her the rights of a daughter. If he marries another woman, he must not deprive the first one of her food, clothing, and marital rights. If he does not provide her with these three things, she is to go free without any payment of money. Anyone who strikes a man and kills him shall surely be put to death. However, if he does not do it intentionally, but Yahuwah lets it happen, he is to flee to a place I will designate. But if a man schemes and kills another man deliberately, takes him away from my altar and put him to death, anyone who attacks his father or his mother shall be put to death. Anyone who kidnaps another and either sells him or still has him when he is caught must be put to death. Anyone who curses his father or mother must be put to death. If men quarrel and one hits the other with a stone or with his fist, and he does not die, but is confined to bed, the one who struck the blow will not be held responsible if the other gets up and walks around outside with his staff. However, he must pay the injured man for the loss of his time and see that he is completely healed. If a man beats his male or female slave with a rod, and the slave dies as a direct result, he must be punished. But he is not to be punished if the slave gets up after a day or two, since the slave is his property. If men who are fighting hit a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, but there is no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. If a man hits a manservant or maidservant in the eye and destroys it, he must let the servant go free to compensate for the eye. And if he knocks out the tooth of a manservant or maidservant, he must let the servant go free to compensate for the tooth. If a bull gores a man or a woman to death, the bull must be stoned to death, and its meat must not be eaten, but the owner of the bull will not be held responsible. If, however, the bull has had the habit of goring and the owner has been warned but has not kept it penned up, and it kills a man or woman, the bull shall be stoned, and the owner also must be put to death. However, if payment is demanded of him, he may redeem his life by paying whatever is demanded. This law also applies if the bull gores a son or daughter. If the bull gores a male or female slave, the owner must pay 30 shekels of silver to the master of the slave, and the bull must be stoned. If a man uncovers a pit or digs one and fails to cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit must pay for the loss. He must pay its owner, and the dead animal will be his. If a man's bull injures the bull of another and it dies, they are to sell the live one and divide both the money and the dead animal equally. However, if it was known that the bull had the habit of goring, yet the owner did not keep it penned up, the owner must pay. Animal for animal, and dead animal will be his.
Right. So there's a lot of commandments being given here. As you see here very early, what I was talking about the thou shalt not murder. Okay, do not lie in wait for your brother and kill him. It says it right there. What happens if they were to do so? The person that lied in wait to kill his brother is to be killed themselves. So again, that's why it's important when we look at context of commandments. Okay, Yahuwah literally a chapter ago said, "Thou shalt not murder." So he's giving you the context in verse 14 here. If anyone lie in wait for his neighbor to slay him by craft, and he go for refuge, you shall take him from my altar to put him to death. So basically, he cannot go to the city of refuge. Why? Because he on purpose laid in wait for his brother to kill him. Mm-hmm. That's why. So we see that's the context. Has to be the context of Exodus 20. Has to be. Because multiple times in scripture, Yahuwah commands them to kill other nations. You can't ignore that. Mm-hmm. Yep. So Yahuwah can't contradict himself. There has to be a context we're missing there. Because I've there's been at times I've misunderstood it. I'm like, oh, is it wrong for me to kill a bug? And I think back how stupid that was, how stupid and short-sighted, because clearly he expounds on that commandment in the next chapter, literally in the next chapter, what he's talking about, thou shalt not murder. Okay. So anyway, now what I don't like is when, I think your version had a weird way it talked about curse. It said whoever curses his father or mother, right? Mm-hmm. Well, actually it's supposed to say strike. It's whoever hits his father or mother. I'm looking at all three different versions here, and almost every version says smite. The Septuagint, whoever smites his father or mother, let him be certainly put to death in verse 15 there.
This is a tax. Anyone who attacks.
Yeah.
And then it says kills at the footnote.
Yeah. So this is talking about death for death. The reason that's important is if the text, if any versions of that verse says whoever curses, like verbally curses and gets killed, that would be a punishment not fitting the crime. Mm-hmm. Yahuwah does not do that. He's not going to give you a more severe penalty than your crime is. Right. So that's the point I'm trying to make. So if your version says curse there, that's a bad translation. Okay. It should say smite, kill. Yeah. Okay. So meaning death for death. It's very important. Very important to understand that. So Yahuwah is not going to give a harsher penalty than the crime. Right. Okay. So, let's see here. So the slayer may flee if he kills by mistake. Okay, so obviously we have rules of marriage here, what's supposed to happen. Basically when a female servant's betrothed to her master, how he's supposed to treat her and all that. Even, you're basically supposed to let your woman go free if you withhold from her the affection that she's supposed to have. Okay. So let's see here. What's interesting about the manservant here is it talks about that if he doesn't want to leave the wife that his master gave him and the children that he got from his master, then he has to serve his master forever. And a lot of the times the servants will serve their master forever because they don't want to leave their wife and they don't want to leave their children.
Right.
So that's very interesting. See here. Let's see if there's anything else I caught here. I find it interesting that the 7th year that they go free, obviously, because the 7th year is the year of release. So that's interesting there. So we're at those that just joined us. We just finished Exodus 21. We'll be going into Exodus 22 next, but we're just looking at certain things that are interesting. Oh, the Levites are physicians.
Yeah.
So it shows you what Yahuwah's original plan was for a physician. It was not to have physicians being paid to take care of you. Yahuwah's original plan with physicians was for his priests to be physicians. Yeah, and there's even punishments for if someone kills their own servant. So that's what people don't understand when you're talking about slaves. Yes, slavery is allowed in the Bible, but there's certain parameters for slavery. Like if you kill your slave for no reason, guess what? You get killed. If I'm not mistaken, what verse 17 literally says. When a man smites his servant or his handmaid with a staff and he die under his hand, condemned shall he be. So meaning that master now is condemned to death. So a lot of people that have harsh feelings about the American slave trade, they look at the Bible like it's against them, when in actuality the Bible has very specific parameters for righteous slavery. And the American slave trade did not go by that. Because if they did, every master that killed their servant would have to die. So anyway, so there's a difference between unrighteous slavery versus righteous slavery. There's a huge, huge difference. Huge difference. Okay. But if he survived 1 day or 2, he shall not be condemned because he was his money. Yeah, his property. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. Okay. So he keeps talking about laws about servants and all that. Now, this is pretty important. I wanted to go to verse 25 here, or 26, I think it is. Because there's people that misunderstand this and want to generalize this, okay? I want to make this very clear. This is not talking about a dog, okay? This is not talking about any type of domestic animal, okay? This is talking about an ox given to goring.
Yeah.
Not a dog killing a mouse. Not a dog killing a hamster, okay? I want to make very clear here because people tend to generalize these commandments, okay? You can't generalize this. There's no way to spiritualize this, okay? It says, if an ox is given into goring, if an ox gores a man or woman unto death, the ox being stoned shall be stoned, and his flesh shall not be eaten. It's talking about an ox goring another ox, okay? So that's very important to understand there because a lot of people misunderstand that. A lot of people try to spiritualize that and try to say every animal that has that problem, you're supposed to kill them. No. Okay, verse 26. But if the ox had gored in time before, and it had been attested to his master, he not keeping him, he has killed man or woman, the ox shall be stoned, the owner be put to death. So does it say if the ox kills any type of creature? No, it says a human. Mm-hmm. Okay. So again, it's very important to take stuff in context. We have to interpret Abba's Torah in context. Okay. Verse 27, and if he should smite out the tooth of his manservant, the tooth of his maidservant, he shall send them away free for their tooth's sake. So if he even causes damage, if slave owners cause damage to their slaves must go free. Just to let you know. So there are parameters that slave owners in the Bible had to go by. Okay. Which, by the way, the American slave trade never did. Okay. They might have misused the Bible, but they never went by the Bible, went by Torah and how they treated their slaves. Okay. So let's not get confused with the American slave trade versus what the Bible says on slavery and how to righteously be a righteous owner of a manservant or a maidservant. Okay. And again, it says, it reiterates about the ox here in verse 28. And if a bull gores a man or woman and they die, the bull shall be stoned with stones. Bull, ox, not pets, okay? Not a dog, not a cat, okay? And his flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the bull shall be clear. Okay. And then it keeps on going, talking about the ox, the bull, okay, what you're supposed to do to it. If it's been given into goring former times, he has not removed him, but he should have slain a man or the woman. The bull shall be stoned, and his owner shall die also. So again, you can't spiritualize that. Again, we got to be careful not to spiritualize things like that. Okay, it's talking about an ox. Okay. So ransom of his soul. Okay, the bull goring the man. Okay. All right. So, and then this is important too. So it talks about if you open a pit or dig a cavity in a stone covered knot and an ox or donkey falls in there, the owner of the pit shall make compensation. He shall give money to their owner, and the dead shall be his own. So, and again, if it talks about a bull goring another bull, what you're supposed to do, you're supposed to sell the living bull and divide the money between the owner that lost his bull and the owner that allowed a bull to be gored. Okay, so that's part of what the goring is talking about. Okay, it's talking about a bull goring another bull. Okay, so they shall divide the dead bull and divide the money of selling the living bull. Okay, he has not removed him, but shall repay the bull for bull. The dead shall be his own. Yada yada yada. All right, so that's the end of Exodus 21. I think we expounded enough on that chapter. All right, so I think, let's see here. So we got Exodus 22 now. All right, so I think I'll read Exodus 22 for us here. All right, so Exodus 22. And if one steals an ox or a sheep or kill it or sell it, he shall pay 5 calves for a calf and 4 sheep for a sheep. So basically, this is the law of restitution here. You're supposed to add a 4 for a fifth is the concept. Okay, and if the thief be found in the breach and be smitten and die, there shall not be bloodshed for him, meaning that it is completely legal if someone finds the thief in their home to kill the thief.
Right.
That's
Self-defense.
Yeah, and believe it or not, this is something applicable today, because you see in this country that they try to condemn the homeowner for killing someone in their home, when in actuality, it's righteous to kill the thief. But if the son be risen upon him, he is guilty. He shall die instead, and if a thief has nothing, let him be sold in compensation for what he has stolen. I think the concept there with the sun rising upon him would be talking about the next morning. So it would already be a day later. And if you're killing the thief, then, essentially, there's some concept behind that. The fact that it's a day later, that would be the problem. Okay, so now we're at verse 4 here. And if the thing stolen be left and be in his hand alive, whether an ox or a sheep, he shall restore them twofold. And if anyone should feed down a field or a vineyard, and should send his beast to feed down another field, he shall make compensation of his own field according to his produce. And if it shall have fed down the whole field, he shall pay for compensation, the best of his own field and the best of his own vineyard. Okay. And if the fire has gone forth and caught thorns, and should also set on fire threshing floors of ears of corn or a field, he that kindles the fire shall make compensation. So it's talking about if someone starts a fire and the fire consumes all the grain, now you got to compensate the owner of the field and all that. Okay. Verse 7, and if anyone gives to his neighbor money or goods to keep, they be stolen out of the man's house. If the thief be found, he shall repay double. But if the thief is not found, the master of the house shall come forward before Yahuwah and shall swear that surely he has not worked wickedness in regard of any part of his neighbor's deposit. Accordingly to every injury alleged, both concerning a calf, a donkey, a sheep, and a garment, and every alleged loss, whatsoever in effect it may be, the judgment of both shall proceed before Yahuwah. He that is convicted by Yahuwah shall repay to his neighbor double. If anyone gives to his neighbor to keep a calf or sheep or any beast, and it be wounded or die or be taken, or no one knows, an oath of Yahuwah shall be between both, that he has surely not at all been guilty in the matter of his neighbor's deposits. So his master shall hold him guiltless, and he shall not make compensation. And if it be stolen from him, and he shall make compensation to the owner. And if it be seized of beasts, he shall bring him to the prey, and he shall not make compensation. And if anyone borrow of his brother or neighbor, and it be wounded or die or be carried away, and the owner of it be not with it, he shall make compensation. But if the owner be with it, he shall not make compensation. But if it be a hired thing, there shall be to him instead of his hire. Okay. And if anyone deceive a virgin, now this is very important here. The context here says, if anyone deceives a virgin that is not betrothed and lies with her, he shall surely endow her. So now he owes her to marry her for a wife to himself. So this is key here. This is not a righteous thing here that the guy did. Okay. The context here is that he seduced a woman that wasn't even betrothed to him and had sex with her. And now he is indebted in Torah to have to make her his wife. He has no other choice. That's the context. Okay. So I've seen some people try to misunderstand that, saying premarital sex is okay. No, that's actually proving premarital sex is not okay. And actually, any guy that seduces a virgin that was not betrothed to him, betrothal is actually the righteous version of what the world has perverted into engagement, basically. Okay, so what it's saying is he deceived a woman, seduced a woman that was not even engaged to him to be married before they became married, and now he has to marry her. So that's what it's really saying. I know a lot of people get confused on that, and there's division in the Hebrew roots movement, and people try to make allowances for premarital sex. No, there's no allowances for it. Yahuwah does not say it's okay to do that. Okay. Marriage always and has been in ancient times the seal of sex is a seal of a marriage covenant. Okay. So essentially, if you're having sex in wedlock, you're essentially participating in something that you're not allowed to participate in until you're married. So essentially is what you're doing, because it's the seal of the covenant. It's the seal of a marriage covenant is to have relations. Okay. You see this multiple times in the Torah, not even before the law of Moses. You see this in Genesis with Isaac and his wife, when it says that he took her into her tent, she became his wife. Okay. So essentially, if you're basically having something that you're not allowed to have. You're basically enjoying something that is only for husband and wife, essentially. Unfortunately, this culture, our sinful Western culture, has made you think that sex is for everyone. No, it's not. It's for husband and wife. That's it. If you're not a husband, you're not a wife, you're not allowed to have sex according to the Creator. It's that simple. Anyway, so I'm not trying to beat a dead horse there, but I just want to explain verse 16, the correct understanding of that. Go ahead, brother Masha.
What if it's the opposite? The woman deceives and says she's a virgin, but really isn't.
Then there's sin for both. Then you have a woman misleading a man. So then you have that. And actually, you know what they would do back in the day?
He wouldn't have to keep.
Well, actually, he wouldn't, Mom, because there's no leeway in that verse. If there's sex before marriage, Mom, they're endowed to marry one another. There's from both angles. There's no way around for the woman or the man. You have sex with someone before marriage.
No, you're right. I was thinking another scenario.
In Yahuwah's eyes, regardless of the scenario, both of them screwed up.
Yeah,
they had premarital sex. Now you have to marry one another, whether you like one another or not, by the way. So there's no that's the point of the verse. But that's a good question by Brother Masha. I would say, yes, as far as sin-wise, guilt-wise, they're both in the wrong if that happens, because the man should have inquired about it. In ancient times, what they would do, if that ever happened, we haven't gotten to this point yet in the Torah, but sometimes a man would accuse the woman of misleading him, like you're talking about, and he would tell her parents, like, I have not found her tokens of virginity. So what her parents would do is they would take her bed sheet in front of the whole city, mind you, the whole city. They would take her bed sheet and show that, her hymen had never been broken. So in Hebrew culture, women are supposed to be virgins before they get married. It's actually a sin for premarital sex and her hymen, to be broken, and and for blood to be stained from her, private area before marriage. That's actually a sin. So, and if they ever found out, like if her parents showed the bed sheet and there was blood on her bed sheet, then if I'm not mistaken, that woman that's accused would actually be stoned. I would have to go back to look at that, but it's a serious offense. We lose track of this because we've been raised in a very sodomite Western
Roman, Greco-Roman, Western society that makes sex commonplace for even people that are not married. So it makes us think that it's normal. It's not. You know. So anyway, so just wanted to explain that, but yeah, it's very serious. So verse 17 says, and if her father positively refused, talking about, you know, if he doesn't want her to marry this guy that took her virginity, will not consent to give her to him for a wife, he shall pay compensation to her father according to the amount of dowry for virgins. So now the guy has to pay the bride price to her father that's reluctant to give her. You shall not save the lives of sorcerers. Another thing that's completely ignored in our society today. You're not even supposed to allow a Wiccan or a witch to live. Like basically what we call today New Agers. Back in the day, they would be stoned. You wouldn't have in Israel a New Ager, a Wiccan, a Gaia worshiper. They'd be killed instantly. Okay, so, and for those that think stoning's going away, you're going to find out in the millennial reign that ain't happening. There's going to be stoning again. And this age, this dispensation of mercy that the Father has on everyone right now, it's going to come to an end. There's going to be stoning again. There's going to be punishments for breaking his Torah again. So, you know, anyway, so I just wanted to mention that. Everyone that lies with a beast, you shall surely be put to death. Now, this is talking about bestiality, by the way. It's talking about intercourse. So when it says lie with in the Old English, or Middle English, I should say, Middle English lie with meant relations. Okay, it doesn't mean like lie next to or to have your dog next to you taking a nap. That's not what lie with meant in the Middle English. Okay. In the 1600s, lie with meant like you're having sex. Okay. All right. So verse 20, he that sacrifices to any mighty ones, but to Yahuwah alone shall be destroyed by death. Okay. And you shall not hurt a stranger nor afflict them, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You shall hurt no widow or orphan. So again, when we see in scripture, right, later on it talks about they did not rightly rule for the orphan and the widow. This is what Yahuwah is talking about. You don't oppress an orphan or a widow. You don't hurt them like physically. You don't do that. You don't injure them. Okay. And if you should afflict them by ill treatment, and they should cry aloud to me, I will surely hear their voice. And I will be very angry, and I will slay you with the sword, and your wives shall be widows, and your children orphans. So, you know, the old saying that we see in Torah talks about an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. This is what that means. Whatever the crime is committed, the punishment has to be 100% equal. So an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. That's what that means. Verse 25, and if you should lend money to your poor brother who is by you, notice how it says your poor brother, okay? Does not say everyone that's poor, okay? It says your poor brother who is by you. You shall not be hard upon him. You shall not exact usury upon him. This is a big misunderstanding in the Hebrew roots movement. Oh, we shouldn't be in debt to anyone. It's a sin to be in debt to anyone, or it's a sin to use usury on the Gentiles. No, it's not. This is something the Jews get, we don't. This is something they understand. Why do you think they're so rich? A lot of them that are just normal citizens. Because they understand these economic concepts of the Torah. You're allowed to lend with interest to a non-believer. There's nothing in the Torah that says you can't do that. And on a whole nother subject, when Paul talks about there shouldn't be lawsuits among you, okay, let's take the phrase among you and place it back into the Torah. what is the Torah understanding of among you, among Israel? Paul is saying that you should not have lawsuits with your brother. He's not saying that you can't sue someone that has ill-treated you. So we need to understand that too. This is why Yahuwah's people right now economically are not in a good way, because we don't understand these things. So anyway, I didn't want to go on a whole rabbit trail, but I did want to expound upon that misunderstandings that people have of Paul's letters. Okay. So there's nothing wrong. I just want to reiterate, nothing wrong. Yahuwah even gives us allowance, righteous allowance to charge interest on a non-believer. Okay, so anyway, and if you take your neighbor's garment for a pledge, you shall restore it to him before sunset. Yep. And we just did a study recently about when does a day start. I really recommend you guys checking that out. But anyone that wants some ammo to prove that a day starts at sunset, verse 26 right here in Deuteronomy 22 is a great one to use. Okay. Notice how sunset is the end of that day. And if you don't give that clothing back to your brother that's pledged it to you, it's sin to you. Why? Because it's the next day at sunset. Okay. For this is his clothing, this is the only clothing of his nakedness, wherein he shall sleep. If then he shall cry to me, I will hearken to him, for I am merciful. Okay. You shall not revile the magistrates or the judges. Okay. Nor speak ill of the rulers of your people. Now, I want to speak on this because this is going to confuse people. Okay, this is the problem with these English translations. They translate Elohim as God every time. And this is the problem I have with it. When you substitute the Hebrew Elohim, Elohim for God, you're going to make people think that Yahuwah is calling calling a human a mighty one. He's not doing that. What he's talking about in context, sometimes the Torah uses the word, or the Tanakh as a whole uses the word Elohim for judges. So let's see here where. So if you look at other versions, it would say, do not revile the magistrates, do not revile the judges. That's what Elohim in that context is referring to. Elohim sometimes even can be used for angels, okay? Angels are rulers and judges as principalities over the nations, okay? So again, Elohim doesn't always mean divinity, doesn't always mean a deity, that word Elohim. So we just got to be careful about that, okay? All right, so now we're getting to the first fruits part here. You shall not keep back the first fruits of your threshing floor and wine press. The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. Now, again, keep in mind, this is a Levitical priesthood commandment. Let's keep that in mind. And that the first fruits had to be given to Yahuwah in his temple, not from our homes. Okay, so let's keep that all in context here. So shall you do with your calf and your sheep and your donkey. 7 days shall be under the mother, and the 8th day shall you give it to me. Okay. All right, so that's talking about setting apart the firstborn. Okay. You shall be set apart men to me. You shall not eat flesh torn by beasts. You shall cast it to the dog. You know what's interesting here is that later on in scripture, not to use it as a derogatory term, but dog can refer to a Gentile and a non-believer. Dogs are actually essentially refer to Gentiles. So we see this later on. How do I know this? There's a second witness in scripture that says what? If a beast that dies of itself, what can you do with it? You can give it to a Gentile. So Yahuwah does, spiritually speaking, consider non-believers dogs. And even the Samaritans understood that, by the way. There's a woman in the New Testament comes to Yahusha, considers herself a dog because he calls her a dog. He says, the children's food don't belong to the dogs, talking to her, saying that the disciples are his children and she's a dog trying to get their food. Mm-hmm. So, so I'm just letting you know, there is precedence for what I'm saying here, that I'm not trying to be derogatory and trying to talk down to or belittle non-believers, but that's what scripture calls non-believers. That's what, if Yahushua was and the disciples were on the earth today, they would consider heathens, Wiccans, anyone that's not in covenant with the Almighty is a dog spiritually. So that's the scriptural definition right there. So that is the end of 22. So please bear with me here, guys. I'm trying to get the shared screen going again. So we're going to be doing Exodus 23 soon. I don't think, was there anything expound upon, Mom? I don't think
so. It was pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah. So let's see here. We got Exodus 23 here, and I think we're going to try to get a new reader here. I see we got a couple more people that have come in. Brother Dennis, would you like to read Exodus 23? I think you're muted, by the way, just to let you know. I had to mute everyone so there was no background noise before. Yeah, there you go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect, brother. Perfect.
Okay, I missed what you said.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you wanted to read the next chapter, Exodus 23.
Oh, let me see.
I'm going to change this compare option. Put the Samaritan Pentateuch on that other one. Oh no, I wanted to change the other one, not that one.
Oh, let's see, what chapter was that?
23.
23? Shema 23, Exodus 23?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me okay?
Perfect, brother, perfect.
Okay. And do not bring a false report. Do not put your hand with the wrong to be a malicious witness. Do not follow a crowd to do evil, nor bear witness in a strife, so as to turn aside after many, to turn aside what is right. And do not favor a poor man in his strife. When you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey going astray, you shall certainly return it to him. When you see the donkey of him who hates you lying under its burden, you shall refrain from leaving it to him. You shall certainly help him. Do not turn aside the right ruling of your poor in his strife. Keep yourself far from the false matter. Do not kill the innocent and the righteous, for I do not declare the wrong right. And do not take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the seeing one and twists the words of the righteous. And do not oppress a sojourner, as you yourselves know the heart of a sojourner, because you were sojourners in the land of Mitzrayim. And for 6 years You are to sow your land and shall gather its increase. But the 7th year you are to let it rest and shall leave it, and the poor of your people shall eat. And when they leave, the beasts of the field eat. Do the same with your vineyard and your olive yard. 6 days you are to do your work, and on the 7th day you rest. In order that your ox and your donkey might rest, and the son of your female servant and the sojourner be refreshed. In all that I have said to you, take heed, and make no mention of the name of other mighty ones, lest it not be heard from your mouth. 3 times in the year you are to observe a festival to me, or the festival of unleavened bread. 7 days you eat unleavened bread, as I command you, at the time appointed in the month of Abib, for in it you came out of Mitzrayim. And do not appear before me empty-handed. In the festival of the harvest, first fruits of your labors, which you have sown in the field, and the festival of the ingathering at the outgoing of the year, when you have gathered in the fruit of your labors from the field. 3 times in the year all your males are to appear before the Master Yahweh. Do not offer the blood of my slaughterings with leavened bread, and the fat of my offering shall not remain until morning. Bring the first of the first fruits of your land into the house of Yahweh, your Elohim. Do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. See, I am sending a messenger before you to guard you in the way and to bring you into the place which I have prepared. Be on guard before him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he is not going to pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. But if you diligently obey his voice, and shall do all that I speak, then I shall be an enemy to your enemies and a distresser to those who distress you. For my messenger shall go before you, and shall bring you into the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, and Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I shall cut them off. Do not bow down to their mighty ones, nor serve them, nor do according to their works, but without fail overthrow them, and without fail break down their pillars. You shall serve Yahweh your Elohim, and he shall barak your bread and your water, and I shall remove sickness from your midst. None shall miscarry or be barren in your land. I shall fill the number of your days. I shall send my fear before you, and cause confusion among all the people to whom you come, and make all your enemies turn their backs to you. And I shall send hornets before you, which shall drive out the Hivite, the Canaanite, and the Hittite from before you. I shall not drive them out from before you in 1 year, lest the land become a waste, and the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. Little by little I shall drive them out from before you, until you have increased and you inherit the land. And I shall set your border from the sea of the reeds of the sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness to the river, for I shall give the inhabitants of land into your hand, and you shall drive them out before you. Do not make a covenant with them, nor with their mighty ones. Let them not dwell in your land, lest they make you sin against me when you serve their mighty ones, when it becomes a snare to you. Looking at this about how we will flourish and not have any miscarriages or anything. Now look at what's going on in this land now.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of miscarriages, a lot of plagues. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening to the people here. Plus the fact that with abortion, you got people, pretty much sacrificing their children to Molech. So
that's right.
technically that you're going to bring even more plagues doing that.
Yep. Worse and worse.
See here. So there's a lot of commandments here. We see the first fruits commandments. We see the commandments of the feasts. All males are to appear before Yahuwah. Even though it's not stated in this chapter, later on in the Torah, Yahuwah specifies a little bit more directly where they're appeared to before him. Because I know a lot of people always ask me, oh, how do we do that today? Well, you can't really do that today.
Yeah.
First fruits you can't do. If we're going to be honest with what the Torah verbatimly says, in the Levitical priesthood, it said to bring your first fruits of your vineyard, keyword yours, not where we're in captivity, your vineyard. Daniel did not bring first fruit offerings in Babylon. Okay, so let's keep everything in context that these commands were meant to be kept in Israel, not in captivity. Number one. Number two, there's a Levitical priesthood that these commands were attached to. That we're not in right now. So there really is no physical offerings, physical first fruits right now. So that would be my answer to that. And the fact that, like I said, it has to be from your own vineyard. And even letting the land rest, which I think it mentioned it either in this chapter or the previous chapter about the 7th year and all that, and letting your land rest and all of that. You can't really do that in a nation, a country that doesn't keep Torah, that the whole land would have to rest, by the way. So when Yahuwah gave that commandment, he doesn't mean by your own vineyard, you can keep the commandment just by you having your property rest. He's talking about the whole land. Okay. So there's like no way to keep that in captivity. It's impossible. There's no way to keep that, because you could do whatever you want on your farm. But guess what? The whole rest of the nation is not going to let the land rest. So there's no way really to keep that in captivity if we're going to be honest with ourselves. There's no way to physically do that. But anyway, I just wanted to explain that, why there's certain commandments we cannot keep in captivity. It's impossible to keep certain commandments in captivity. Brother Dennis just read about the messenger of Yahuwah here, which we did a study last night, clearly showing that's Yahusha himself. So he is the destroyer of Nephilim for all intents purposes. He is the destroyer of the giants, and even you could say destroyer of the gods of the nations. Because you see in Psalms 82, Yahusha himself is proclaiming judgment on these principalities that were supposed to govern the Gentiles. They never really did. They never really took care of the Gentiles like their jobs were, and they would rather be served by the Gentiles as their gods rather than do what they're supposed to do. And so I would call even Yahusha destroyer of the lesser Elohim. In my opinion, I do believe that those principalities will be judged on Judgment Day for what they did. You will die like men. So yeah. Trying to think what else in this chapter. There's a lot of commandments that we went through in this chapter. You have obviously the caring for the poor, the widow, the orphan, rightly ruling. So when it says judgment, it's really talking about when they go to court. Okay, so when it says to judge for the poor, the widow, and the orphan, it's mainly talking about do not judge impartiality, do not allow the rich to be favored. That's what it's talking about in that verse. So let's see here. It talks about bribes. The chapter talked about bribes. Don't receive a bribe. Let's see here. Don't afflict a sojourner. Okay. Yes, we already talked about letting the land rest in the 7th year. Okay. Okay, oppressing the stranger. Okay, I'm trying to think if there was anything else. Obviously, we have the festivals again, unleavened bread, You have the festivals of a festival unleavened bread mentioned, but then it goes on to mention 3 feasts during the year. So that would be unleavened bread, that would be Shavuot, and that would be the third one would be Sukkot. So when he says 3 times in the year appear before him, those are the 3 feasts of the year that he's talking about. And the Septuagint is a little bit clearer when the last feast actually happens. It's not the end of the year. So anyone that I always point this out, how it doesn't make any sense for Sukkot to be the end of the year when you still got plenty of months before spring. It's definitely not the end of the year. The Septuagint says at the middle of the year, which makes a lot more sense because you're halfway through the year at this point. Or you could say maybe a little bit farther than 50% through, but to say that we're at the end already, that's kind of crazy. And that means you're getting rid of all the months of winter, but anyway, I just wanted to mention that. Also, another important commandment Brother Dennis read from was, you do not offer the unleavened bread. Do not offer with unleavened bread the blood of my Passover. Now, hold on. Now, it should be leavened, not unleavened. Hold on. This doesn't make any sense. I'm gonna look at other versions on that verse. Let me see here, because that's weird. You shouldn't say that. Hold on a second. Exodus 23:15. Shouldn't say don't offer it with unleavened bread. That's what you should be offering it with. Huh. It's interesting. I'm gonna look at that because that seems to contradict other places. Mom, does yours say that?
Made without yeast.
No. Like, does it say don't offer unleavened bread with the Passover?
What verse is that?
15. 23:15.
It talks about unleavened bread. It doesn't talk about Passover.
Because it says here, thou shalt not offer the unleavened bread, the blood of my Pascha, meaning you cannot offer unleavened bread with the blood of the lamb.
Mine doesn't say that.
Because that would make no sense. So that's weird. The Targum says that. I don't know why you would have. And then it goes on to say, neither shall the fat of the sacrifice of my feast remain on the altar until morning. Interesting. Oh, that's a little weird there. So I don't know, because I've seen in other places in the Torah where it's the exact opposite. It will say, don't offer leavened bread with the Passover. So I've seen the exact opposite the majority of the time. So I don't know, that's a little weird. 3 times a year shall all your males appear before Yahuwah, your Elohim. We already talked about that. It's pretty much self-explanatory. And then it goes into casting out all the 7 nations that Yahuwah is going to cast out before them so they can go into the land of Canaan. Now, this is interesting. I find this interesting in verse 18. It says here in the Targum, it says, for in my name are his words. Interesting. As we know about who the messenger is that Yahuwah is sending. That's interesting. In my name are his words. Which again, I think that would be, see, the verse numberings are a little bit off, I'm noticing.
Yeah, they are.
I think verse 18 in the Targum is verse 20 in the Masoretic and the Septuagint. So what it's saying here, though, is that So they combine for some reason 18 and 20 for some reason here. But it says, rebel not against him, for he will not forgive your sins. For in my name are his words.
Right.
Which is interesting because we know that when Yahushua came, he said, my doctrine is not my own. So I find that interesting. And yeah. Do not see the lamb in its own mother's milk. Again, for any Jewish viewers and listeners, this does not mean you can't eat cheeseburgers, okay? I know that's a big rabbinical misunderstanding, but clearly it's talking about boiling a lamb in its own mother's milk, okay? That's what it's talking about. And some people have even pointed out that it could be talking about offerings, because we just saw earlier, a couple of chapters earlier, about that 8 days it has to be under its mother, and then you give it as a firstborn offering. So it could even be talking about an offering. And either way, if it's just talking about regular cooking a lamb, you're not to cook it in its own mother's milk. That's what it actually means. Oh, and right here, here's proof about where you have to bring the first fruits. Brother Dennis actually read about it in this chapter. It says in verse 19, you shall bring the first offerings of the first fruits of your land, into the house of Yahuwah, your Elohim. So that context would refer to the literal tabernacle or the temple. So again, there's no way for you to spiritualize that and say, well, we're his temple. How are you going to bring that into you're going to bring it into your body? I'm not trying to be facetious, but at the same time, it's like, there's no way to spiritualize that. And behold, I send my messengers. So again, brother Dennis read that, talking about Yahushua, sending Yahushua before them. Okay. And this is pretty key, though, here in verse 22. It says, if you shall be to me, if you will do all the things that I charge you with, meaning command you or order you, and keep my covenant, you shall be to me a peculiar people above all nations. Now, what's interesting here is no other version uses the word peculiar. And the reason I find it interesting is because this is the exact word kapha used in his own writings. So right here, Peter's actually quoting from Exodus 23, what is that, verse 22? Yeah, so kapha, also known as the Apostle Peter, quoted from Exodus 23:22 in the Septuagint. He said, you shall be to me a peculiar people above all nations. For the whole earth is mine, you shall be to me a royal priesthood, set apart nation. These words shall you speak to children of Yasher all. You shall indeed, if keyword if there, if you shall indeed hear my voice and do all the things I shall tell you, I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. And then talks about, for my messenger shall go forth and destroy all these nations. We talked about that already. And then it talks about, you will not worship their mighty ones, nor serve them. You shall not do according to their works, but shall utterly destroy them and break to pieces their pillars. Now, we could even say, technically speaking, their works would be all their customs. He's basically saying, don't copy them. What you see these Canaanites doing, don't do what they do. And you shall serve Yahuwah your Elohim, and will barak, and I will barak your bread, your wine, and your water. I will turn away sickness. The reason why there's so much sickness in this country, like Brother Dennis just said, is because the majority of this country is disobedient to him. That's the gist of that. There shall not be on your land one that is impotent or barren. I will surely fulfill the number of your days. And I will send terror before you. I will strike with amazement all nations to which you shall come. I will make all your enemies to flee.
And then he talks about send hornets before you, shall cast out the Amorites, Hivites, Canaanites, and the Hittites from you. I will not cast them out in 1 year, lest the land become desolate and the beasts of the field multiply against you. So there seems to be a concern there. I always find that verse interesting. There seems to be a concern for the beasts of the field. Like what is so dangerous about them? And I kind of wonder how many dinosaurs are still left over at this point. I kind of wonder. Because a regular beast of the field, you wouldn't think would be so concerning for these Israelites. But if you got a behemoth walking around, if you got even a unicorn, which is a one-horned horse that's pretty big, by the way. Like unicorns were pretty big. They weren't like skinny horses. If you got those type of creatures roaming around, any type of dinosaur, Stegosaurus or this or that, there would be a cause for concern for those type of creatures multiplying against Israel. That would be definitely a concern. So I kind of wonder what type of beasts Yahuwah is actually talking about. It could be regular beasts. If you think about it, if you got too many lions, too many bears, it's possible. But I don't know. I kind of see something a little bit. I think there's something missing there that we're not looking into. So let's see here. It talks about where their borders are going to be: the Red Seas to the Philistines, the borders of the Philistines, wilderness to the great sea, to the great river Euphrates. I will give into your hand those that dwell in the land, and will cast them out from you. You shall make no covenant with them and their mighty ones. They shall not dwell in your land, lest they cause you to sin against me. For if you should serve their mighty ones, these will be an offense or a stumbling block to you. So again, in the covenant, when Yahuwah says, do not make a covenant with them, he's talking about specific tribes. He's talking about specific Canaanite tribes. He's not saying that you can't ever have a contract with a Gentile. He's not saying that you can't ever be employed to a Gentile, contracted to a Gentile for work. Because I just want to make that clear, because I know there's a lot of confusion about that. When you try to spiritualize that commandment there, you're going to start putting heavy yokes on yourself. So it's talking about specific tribes they're not to make covenants with. And the specific covenant Yahuwah's even talking about has to do with acceptance of other mighty ones or worship of other mighty ones it's connected to also. So just to keep everything in context there's a specific covenant he's talking about. A lot of the times in ancient times when you made a covenant with another nation, you're like accepting their other mighty ones. What we should be more worried about is that we have this idea of coexisting and saying it's valid for Buddhism to exist and it's valid for this to exist. To me, you're almost borderline making a covenant by doing that. You're by this whole coexist concept. It's almost like making a covenant with these other religions, because you're saying, oh yeah, it's okay. You can have your own thing. I can have my own thing. And, acceptance of other religions and all that. So to me, that's a lot closer to breaking that commandment than worried about that you're employed by a Gentile. But anyway. So let's see here. I think we got Exodus 24 here. Trying to see who else we have back on here. Okay. Let's see. I think for time's sake, I'll read Exodus 28 just because it's very short.
24, you mean?
Oh, man, 24, yeah. Yeah, I got tongue-tied there. Exodus 24, I think I'll just read because it's very short. It's 18 verses, and we'll see if we have enough time for 25. I would like to try to fit 25 in today, but just for time's sake, I'll do 24. All right, so Exodus 24. And Moshe wrote all the words of Yahuwah and arose in the morning and built an altar at the lower part of the mountain and 12 pillars, according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent the firstborn sons of Yashrael, and they offered holocaust and sacrificed oxen, set apart victims before Yahuwah. Okay. And Moshe went in and related to all the people all the words of Yahuwah and the ordinances, and all the people answered with one voice, saying, all the words which Yahuwah has spoken, we will do and be obedient. Okay. Moshe wrote all the words of the law. Moshe rose up early in the morning and built an altar under the mountain, and 12 stones of the 12 tribes of Israel. He set forth the young men of the children of Yashrael, and they offered burnt offerings, and they sacrificed young calves as a peace offering to Yahuwah. Okay, and Moshe took half the blood and poured it into bowls, and half the blood he poured out upon the altar. Okay, and he took the book of the covenant and read it in the ears of the people. And they said, all things whatsoever Yahuwah has spoken we will do, and hearken therein. And Moshe took the blood and sprinkled it upon the people and said, behold, the covenant of Yahuwah, which Yahuwah has made with you concerning all these words. And Moshe went up, and Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Yashrael. And they saw the place where the Elohim of Yashrael stood, and under his feet was as it were the work of sapphire slabs, and as it were the appearance of the firmament of heaven in purity. Okay. So sapphire, by the way, is like a dark, deep sea blue, almost similar to a lapis stone, is the color of a sapphire. And of the chosen ones of Yashrael, there was not even one missing. And they appeared in the place of Yahuwah and did eat and drink. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, come up to me in the mountain and be there, and I will give you the tables of stone, the law, the commandments, which I've written to give them laws. And Moshe rose up and Yahusha, his attendant, and they went up to the mountain of Yahuwah. Okay, we have, and the elders, they said, rest there till we return to you. And behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. If any man has a cause to be tried, let them go to them. Yeah. So here we go. And Moshe and Yahusha went up to the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. And the splendor of Yahuwah came down upon Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And Yahuwah called Moshe on the 7th day out of the midst of the cloud. And the appearance of the splendor of Yahuwah was as burning fire on the top of the mountain before the children of Yashrael. Kind of reminds me what Paul says, that our Elohim is a consuming fire, all-consuming fire. And Moshe went into the midst of the cloud and went up to the mountain and was there in the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. So pretty self-explanatory there. All right. So we have, we have the sapphire slabs. Obviously, that's what the stones were used to make the 2 tables of for the 10 sayings, the 10 commandments, which is interesting because really that's the color of the law. And we see later on that a similar color is used for the tassels, for the tzitzis. So it seems like blue is his color. For some reason, blue represents Yahuwah in his character. It's kind of funny that the sky is blue,
Right.
and all that. So it's very interesting to me. So I think because we had a decent early start, I think we'll do one more chapter for today, but I think 25 is going to be it. Mom, you think you could handle
Sure.
25?
Sure.
All right.
Okay, the offerings for the tabernacle. Yahuwah said to Moshe, tell the children of Israel to bring me an offering. You are to receive the offering from me, from each man whose heart prompts him to give. These are the offerings you are to receive. That's not going to help, honey. It's the problem is that it's kind of like blinding me.
All right, hold on. Just pause for a second. Let me help you out.
Well, that's better. Okay.
We'll have to just turn your little lamp on. No big deal.
These are the offerings you are to receive from them: gold, silver, and bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and fine linen. Goat hair, ram skins dyed red, and hides of, mine says sea cows. I know it does not say that in other versions, but it says hides of sea cows, acacia wood, olive oil for the light, spices for the anointing oil and for the fragrant incense, and onyx stones and other gems to be mounted on the ephod and breastpiece. Then have them make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell among them. Make this tabernacle and all its furnishings exactly like the pattern I will show you. Now, this is entitled the Ark. Have them make a chest of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits high. Overlay it with pure gold, both inside and out, and make a gold molding around it. Cast 4 gold rings for it, and fasten them to its 4 feet, and 2 rings on one side and 2 rings on the other. Then make poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. Insert the poles into the rings on the sides of the chest to carry it. The poles are to remain in the rings of this ark. They are not to be removed. Then put it in the ark, the testimony which I will give you. Make an atonement cover of pure gold, 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide, and make 2 cherubim out of hammered gold at the ends of the cover. Make 1 cherub on one end and the second cherub on the other. Make the cherubim of one piece with the cover at the 2 ends. Cherubim are to have their wings spread upward, overshadowing the cover with them. The cherubim are to face each other, looking toward the cover. Place the cover on top of the ark and put it in the ark, the testimony which I will give you. There above the cover, between the 2 cherubim that are over the ark of the testimony, I will meet with you and give you all my commands for the children of Israel. Okay, next portion is the table. Make a table of acacia wood, 2 cubits long, 1 cubit wide, and 1.5 cubits high. Overlay it with pure gold and make a gold molding around it. Also make around it a rim of handbreadth wide and put a gold molding on the rim. Make 4 gold rings for the table and fasten them to the 4 corners where the 4 legs are. The rings are to be close to the rim to hold the poles used in carrying the table. Make the poles of acacia wood, overlay them with gold, and carry the table with them, and make its plates and ladles of pure gold, as well as its pitchers and bowls for the pouring out of offerings. Put the bread of the presence on this table to be before me at all times. Okay, now the lampstand. Make a lampstand of pure gold and hammer it out. Base and shaft. Its Its flow like cups, buds, and blossoms shall be of one piece with it. Its flowers, its flowers like cups, buds, and blossoms shall be of one piece with it. 6 branches are to extend from the sides of the lampstand, 3 on one side and 3 on the other. 3 cups shaped like almond flowers with buds and blossoms are to be on one branch, 3 on the next branch, and the same for all 6 branches extending from the lampstand. And on the lampstand there are to be 4 cups shaped like almond flowers with buds and blossoms. 1 bud shall be under the first pair of branches extending from the lampstand, a 2nd bud under the 2nd pair, and a 3rd bud under the 3rd pair, 6 branches in all. The buds and branches shall all be of one piece with the lampstand hammered out of pure gold. Then make it 7 lamps and set them up on it, so that they light the space in front of it. Its wick, trimmers, and trays are to be of pure gold. A tablet of pure gold is to be used for the lampstand and all these accessories. See that you make them according to the pattern shown you on the mountain. I'm just looking at my footnote. A talent is 75 pounds. And I remember from before that what's I going to say? A cubit. A cubit is about 1.5 feet. Just so we can sort of figure in our minds what kind of measurements we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me see here. So we got the lampstand, table of showbread, the bronze altar, the Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat, the tabernacle itself. And my mom and I were talking about this other day. There's got to be a reason for the colors of red, purple, gold, and blue. There's just got to be a reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's used for like practically everything. It's used for the hangings of the tabernacle itself and the courtyard, even the hangings of the courtyard, the veil, so many things that it's used for. What's interesting though, the gifts that they are to give as contributions to make this stuff, the Septuagint actually calls it a first fruits offering. So this is kind of interesting where it has nothing to do with food, but it's called first fruits, a first fruits offering. So I find it interesting that it does that. So, I mean, this is self-explanatory too. What I really recommend people do, and I'm probably going to do this as well, I'll try to take photos of this rose book that we have. It gives you these pictures of what the implements of the tabernacle would look like. And so, I mean, unless you see a decent picture of what you're reading, sometimes it's hard to picture what's actually going on. Like when it talks about the grading of the gold and all that, because this is not the only chapter, mind you, in Exodus that it talks about this. It also talks about this. Try and use the right. In I think chapter, what was it the other day I just read? It was either 38 or 39. He reiterates this, and actually it's the chapter that they actually do this and make the stuff. So it gets reiterated again, and you kind of, even when you're reading like Exodus 38 and 39, you're trying to picture how that's working. I definitely
recommend having a visual when you're reading chapters like this, because then you can kind of figure out what it's talking about. Even when it's describing the lampstand, it's kind of hard. It's talking about the knobs and and all that. So I know I needed a visual when I was reading about all the inner constructions of the tabernacle, and talks about the frames and this and that, and talks about the posts, the pillars, and all that. So yeah. So anyway, that was pretty much today's reading. So I appreciate everyone joining in, and for those that were joining as guests with us, I really appreciate that. And also those that are watching on YouTube, I appreciate you guys tuning in today and listening in, and hopefully something synced in out of all of what we read. So for brothers and sisters out there that will see this later on Facebook, I hope you'll enjoy it. So to our brothers and sisters in Yahushua HaMashiach out there, Yahushua the Messiah, just want to say have a great rest of your Sabbath. Shabbat Shalom. And Yahuwah willing, see you next week.